Today I am reviewing Glass Houses, a 2006 novel from Rachel Caine that began the Morganville Vampires series, which peaked at 16 books in 2016, and after Caine's passing last year, barring life imitating art a little bit too much, is not getting any longer. So if you look at the dates of the series, you'll see that for 10 years there was roughly one of these books every 6 months. Pretty prolific by most people's standards. However, Caine was actually active from 2003 to 20 and wrote a total of 64 books in that time, bumping the 2-year standard of this series to nearer 4 overall. Pretty prolific becomes highly prolific. Is that enough time to turn out something of enough quality to warrant 15 sequels in this series alone? So, let's sink our teeth into the plot, and remember, you can use the slider or the chapters in the description to skip this part if you prefer, but don't consider any part of the review spoiler free. And the story follows Claire Danvers, a child genius who raced through high school in 2 years and is in college in Texas ahead of her typical age group. But she embarrassed the local Regina George and is being bullied to the point where her life is genuinely threatened when the mean girls push her down a flight of stairs. She flees the dorms to find a home off campus and finds the Glass House, named after Michael Glass, its owner, who, with roommates Eve and Shane, take pity on her and allow her to stay. Later, the police come looking for Claire, but her new friends hide her. Eve tells Claire that Morganville is run by vampires and not to go out at night, but Claire is not completely convinced. She returns to the dorms for her stuff, where Monica, her bully, drags her into a basement full of the junk of students who have gone missing, and they threaten to kill Claire, but they don't. Claire then learns that her roommate Michael is a ghost because he died when a vampire tried to turn him. She also finds out that Oliver, the owner of the local coffee shop, has some sort of influence with the local vampires that makes his establishment a haven of sorts. Shane makes a deal with Brandon, a vampire, to stop the bullying of Claire in exchange for some of Shane's blood. Shane accompanies Claire to college to function as a bodyguard, but fails, and one of Monica's minions throws acid on Claire's back. After a spell in hospital, Claire returns to the Glass House to find a vampire outside acting menacing, and Eve reveals that the local vampires are looking for a book. They are so keen to find the book that many locals have the symbol on its cover tattooed on them, and there is a huge reward. Claire believes that if she finds the book, she can get Shane out of the deal that he made with Brandon for his blood. Because the book is magic, the vampires can't find it or read it, so they need humans to find it, but Claire thinks that she'll be able to fake a version of it, and they won't be able to tell until after they've cancelled the Brandon/Shane deal. Because Claire doesn't want to pay £3 a month for a VPN, she goes to the coffee shop where she believes her internet searching on how to fake an ancient vampire book will be more anonymous. There she meets Brandon again, and on the way home with Eve, they're attacked by vampires. Back home they discover local medium Miranda is there, and she's screeching about a death in the house and blood, which Claire believes proves that Miranda is a legit psychic who is witnessing Michael's death. Claire then goes to the university library to look for a book about how to fake the vampire book. There she finds that the library's 4th floor is not on the list of floors, so she goes to the science lab and gets some liquid nitrogen which she uses to break the lock. Inside, she meets 2 vampires who are about to throw her out when she discovers her English professor is looking through the store of rare books for the vampire. He thinks that she's there to help, so they look together. Then the professor tries to steal a first edition Charles Dickens, and the vampires find out, so Claire attacks them with the liquid nitrogen and escapes with the professor, who then has a heart attack and dies, but tells Claire where to find the book the vampires are looking for. Shane and Claire break into the professor's house and find the book. They return to the Glass House, and Claire's parents have arrived, and they are unhappy that she's not in her classes, has been bullied, is living off campus with boys, and that they have beer in the fridge. They say that they will return in 2 days and take her home. Seeking to end the situation with Shane and Brandon, she goes to Oliver, the coffee shop guy, and tells him that she has the book. He says he will come to the house that evening to get it, but on her way home, Claire is kidnapped by the Monicas, who bundle her into a van and drive off, telling her they're going to set her on fire. But when she screams, they panic and they crash the van. Claire runs into a nearby church and meets another vampire, Amelie, who tells Monica to go away. Claire then goes home and Oliver arrives, but Michael refuses to let him in, saying he is the vampire that killed him. Oliver uses magic vampire power to make Eve invite him in, but after Claire slaps Eve, she cancels the invitation and Oliver is ejected. He returns with the police, enough of whom are human, so that they can get into the house. Michael and Shane fight them off, but Miranda gets into the house and attacks Eve. Then the Monikers get in and attack Claire. Then a policeman makes the Monikers leave because Shane gives him the book. Then Amelie arrives and makes everybody leave. She takes the real book because Shane had fobbed off the police with a fake, and then she leaves. Then Shane's dad arrives because he is Shane's dad, the vampire slayer. They discover that Michael is a ghost but think he's a vampire and prepare to kill him, and the book ends on that cliffhanger. And if you're thinking, great, Stoker's ghost, that's a whole lot of plot. Is it? Because a plot should be more than a bunch of stuff that happens. It needs to matter, to connect, for one thing to lead to another. The police come to the house and it's scary that the police know something's up because though they hide Claire from him, he can see that there's a spare plate in the kitchen. Putting aside the unlikeliness of noting that in student accommodation, why is it scary? Because the police don't come back, they don't stake out the building. Why do they even come at all if they don't care enough to do either of those things? The police take virtually no interest in her after this visit, and it's not an investigation if they don't do any investigating. When she bumps into a cop in a shop, he reveals he's a vampire and offers her protection for unspecified costs. Probably nothing good, but he doesn't actually do anything. So if they don't want her to hand her over to the vampires, she hasn't broken any laws unless it's illegal for her to live there because she's 16, in which case why hide her? She hasn't moved any of her stuff in, so they could just say that she's there studying. It's just weird and pointless to create drama and then not have that drama go anywhere. When her parents come and visit and there's drama about nothing, beer in the fridge and boys, they do nothing beyond giving a time limit for her to leave. That time limit is irrelevant because she tells Oliver about the book and the vampires lay siege to the house before the time limit is up. And really, what's really dramatic? Vampire attacks or having to go home with your parents? What's the point of the exchange where he says this? Brandon likes striking from an angle, not straight on, so you'd better watch out for your friends as well. If coming at you from the side means I'll use vampire powers you know I have to make Eve open the door, that's not from an angle. Coming at something obliquely is supposed to mean they'll be unpredictable, clever or vicious, or hopefully all three. Nothing fitting any of the three happens here. It's an incredibly frustrating read when the author sets something up like it's dangerous and nobody reacts to it like it's dangerous. Monica pushes Claire down a flight of stairs. Everybody believes that this is an attempt on her life. Its severity is the prime reason Michael allows her to live in the glass house. But she goes back to college the next day. Monica kidnaps her and drags her into the basement, and then she shows her all the things left behind by dead and missing college students. She says that she'll just be another one. Monica lets her go for no good reason. Later, she arranges for acid to be thrown on her, later still to burn her alive. Between the two, prior to learning that Michael is a ghost and can't move beyond the walls of the glass house, there is literally no reason for Claire to stay in Morganville. Even afterwards, it's debatable given that they do nothing whatsoever to help Michael. They don't even ask Amelie if she can help him before giving up the book that Amelie's looking for. Shane's deal with Brandon is apparently a bigger deal, even though it doesn't really seem like it. Shane has traded his blood for Claire's safety, which is by no means improved by the deal. But Shane is unlikely to die giving up the blood donation, and he won't turn into a vampire. That doesn't work like that, according to this novel. Michael's situation seems a much bigger deal, but nobody acts like it is. The reason Claire gives for not leaving town, even though the police are looking for her, a bit, I suppose, but the scene's written like she's supposed to be in danger. Monica is actively trying to kill her, and vampires are hunting her, and all before Shane's intervention or Michael's situation is revealed. So why doesn't she leave? Because she's not a quitter. But that's a little bit like having a chainsaw and swinging it at your own bollocks and then not stopping yourself because you're not a quitter. Going home would be the easiest thing in the world, only it would mean failure, and they'd never believe a word of this stuff. Any chance of making Yale or MIT or Caltech would be blown completely. She supposed it was kind of dumb to be thinking of it that way, but these things were real to her, and we all know that attempted murder isn't. When you attempt to explain away your characters being dumb, then you acknowledge that their behaviour makes no sense. The police don't investigate Claire for a very simple reason. Caine has 3 months to write a book if she's going to release 4 a year, so she doesn't have time to come up with a story that fits together. If the police were watching the house, they saw Claire as parents leave, they would pick them up nice and easy, and the vampires could use them as leverage to get the book, and Caine would have tied together 3 threads that in this format do not tie together at all. Trying to distill this shambolic story into a pitch, you'd probably go with something like an archaeologist tries to stop a powerful artifact from falling into the Nazis' hands. Sorry, that's Indiana Jones. Summarising this would be really difficult because McGuffin isn't introduced until exactly halfway through, and Claire doesn't even look for it. She finds it when she's looking for a way to make a convincing fake, even though the forgery would absolutely get them all killed as soon as it was discovered. The search for the book is 2 people sat in a room, one of whom gets killed because he's trying to steal a Charles Dickens first edition. He tells Claire where the book is, having already found it. Would it not have been better to not get killed and be able to tell her in your own time? Stealing the book is a real dumbass move at that point because in truth, he really doesn't have a reason to believe that Claire isn't a plant until he's caught with it. He's a professor, but he's not very bright. She's a genius prodigy, and she's even worse. She's supposed to be a genius. She skipped 2 grades in high school, and there isn't another option for her at the college level. Because this college has a really bad reputation. TPU's library was huge and dusty. More proof, if she needed it, that TPU was first and only a party school. If Claire knows it, I suspect there are people at Yale and MIT that know it as well. But surely with a basement full of dead students' belongings, other people would begin to notice as well. Well, it seems like some of them, even as far as a local TV, have noticed. Vamps have a deal with the school. They get to take 2% a year right off the top. Used to be more, but I think they got worried. Couple of close calls with the media. There's nothing TV stations like more than a pretty young college girl gone missing. Well, it seems like it would be good advice to tell them just to take the boys, but 2% sounds like peanuts, right? Barely even worth noticing. Well, this is a fictional university and Caine doesn't give us the exact numbers of enrolled students. But if we take my local university as a guide, there are 25,000 students enrolled. 2% off the top is not one pretty young college girl gone missing, it's 250, assuming that half of the 2% are women. Caine went to Texas Tech University. She was kind enough to say so in the dedication to this book, which has 40,000 students enrolled. 2% of that is 800 people. 800 people a year do not just disappear into the ether. And it isn't 800% of the local population downtrodden by vampires and cut off from the rest of the world either, because the locals are protected. How would you even stop this from getting out? Some people leave. I mean, Shane did, Michael said. I think you mean, how do you stop them from talking? Shane says that once you get about 10 miles outside of Morganville, you get this terrible headache, and then you just start to forget. First, you can't remember what the name of the town was, and then you can't remember how to get there, and then you don't remember that the town had vampires or the rules. It just doesn't exist anymore for you. It comes back if you return to town, but once you're out, you can't run around telling all about Morganville because you just don't remember. So if Shane forgot how to get to Morganville, how did he return? Well, Michael phoned him and asked him to come back, which means the spell or whatever it is that's protecting the town is basically useless because you can phone, email, or even fax out anything you like. Shane phones his dad and says, come back and help with the you-know-whats, and he does. Shane doesn't give him the address or have to tell him what's going on. He clearly knows. And if he's inside Morganville, why does it take him the better part of 24 hours to respond to Shane's urgent summons? But I think the genius Claire is exactly as thick as Rachel Caine. When she's planning her forgery, Claire muses, vellum would be hard. You could get it, but it was easy to trace. But it wasn't any good being freak smart if you couldn't get around things like that. Oh yeah, she needed to think about using somebody else to do the research too. Too dangerous having tracks that led right back to the glass house. Because the forgery idea goes nowhere, it's a time waster because Claire finds the actual book in the first day of working on her forgery. These 2 ideas go nowhere. They're just a waste of your time. Or mine, because I read this. It is possible that you didn't, you lucky so-and-so. So that her internet traffic doesn't lead back to the house, she goes to the coffee shop and uses their Wi-Fi, trusting that in a town ran by vampires that the Wi-Fi isn't being watched. But it doesn't need to be because she's working on her plan to defraud the vampires in a public place that she knows is frequented by vampires. Freak smart. This video is not sponsored by NordVPN, but what the fuck? Nor is it sponsored by Google, but what the fuck? I thought that it was more than likely that would be the stupidest passage in the entire book, but I was actually wrong. The vampires turn up to the glass house determined that nothing will stop them getting that book. By way of menace, they bring with them 2 fire trucks. Oh my god, how terrifying! They're planning on burning the house down with the book they desperately want inside it. Never in all of human history has fire done any damage to a book. And if that sounds like the peak of stupid, Michael, who has seen the fire trucks, is confident he's safe because they can't hurt me except by hurting the house itself. They can't kill me except by destroying the house. Never in all of human history has fire done any damage to a house, except the one that burnt down and killed Shane's sister. I'm pretty sure that Caine's story is stupid, and her characters are stupid because she learned everything that she knows about young people and about vampires from watching Buffy. And I think this because all of her characters and her narrator have that Whedon-esque dialogue. Here are some examples if you wish to mutilate your pause button. But it's also worth considering, while reading these, that Caine grew up in Texas. She went to college in Texas, but not a single person in this novel says y'all. In conclusion, this is one of the most boring and stupidest stories I've read in a long time, and it pisses me off that there are so many of these. And I'm not just talking about Caine's nor the ones she publishes in other names, but the market for novels aimed at teenage girls is full of the most banal, samey, god-awful garbage. I met hundreds of school children over the past couple of years of a wide variety of reading application and ability, and not one of them do I think would actually enjoy this. I have no idea who's buying these books, but I really wish they would stop, because all of the girls that I've taught deserve better, and there is better out there. I won't vouch for the quality of vampire books. That does seem pretty desperate for the last 20 years or so probably, but the books I've seen girls reading, obviously Harry Potter, Hunger Games, Agatha Oddly, Jessica Jenkins, are all miles better than this. It's no wonder that manga is getting more and more popular in schools. I'm seeing a lot of girls reading My Hero Academia and Attack on Titan, and I don't know either of those, but they simply can't be as bad as this shit. They can't. For the love of God, understand that you have the power. If you stop buying this crap, they will have to give you something better. I'll see you in class, but please bring one of these books with you in case the heating is out. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe because I have asked nicely. Have I mentioned how hot Michael is? Hot, hot, hot. I mean, all guitar players are crushworthy. It's like it's issued with the talent, but I've been noticing lately that he is totally Hottie McHot of Hotland. Okay, so it says on the cover that this book glows in the dark, like all good literature should. So we're going to check that out. Hey, that's pretty good. That's the only thing about this book that doesn't suck.